What's up guys, it's Priority Tech, and today we're going to be looking at PCs that you can build in every budget, starting from $200 and going all the way up to $3,000. Just a few things before we get into the lists. All parts that are used in this video are new parts, so I didn't use any used parts throughout this video. And the next thing is all the parts that are going to be in this video, there's a link down in the description for each and every one. And they're Amazon affiliate links, which means that it doesn't cost you any extra, but if you make a purchase through those links, then it actually gives me a bit of a kickback. So I would really appreciate it if you guys could make those purchases through those links. It would help me out a lot. And the final thing is I thought this was an original idea. I was the first person to do this, but upon looking it up on YouTube, it turns out that Christopher Yee has already done a video on this. So in case you want to check that out, I'll also leave his video down in the description. So without further ado, let's hop onto my computer and check out these lists. Alright, so the first list is the $300 one. So on here we have, starting off, we have the Intel Pentium Gold G5400, and I know this is only a 2-core processor, but at least it is 4 threads. But again, this is only $300, so at that price point, it's you can't really expect much more than that. And I would recommend, the problem is right now all budget Ryzen processors, like all of the G processors with their Vega graphics built in into the APU, those are all sold out everywhere right now. So if you can find them in stock, then they're usually really expensive right now. But if you can find one at MSRP or at a good price, then I would highly recommend going that route instead. And then for the motherboard, we have the Gigabyte B365M DS3H Micro ATX motherboard. So again, this isn't the best board, but it does have 4 DIMM slots, and it does have an M.2 slot as well, an 8-pin CPU connector. So for the price, it really isn't that bad. But of course, at $300, there's not much better that you can do here. And then for RAM, we have 2x4 gigabytes so a total of 8 gigabytes of DDR4 2400 Crucial Ballistics RAM. So of course, I didn't want to skimp out and just get one stick, because single channel, it would be a little bit cheaper. It'd save a little bit of money, but I think that it's not really worth it to skimp out on that. It's not a huge price difference, and I think that's a pretty big performance bump when you go up to 2 sticks running a dual channel. So of course, it's only 2400 speed memory, but I think for this price point, and since we're running an Intel processor, it's not quite as important to have faster speed RAM with a Ryzen processor. Then it's a little bit more of a big deal to try and get that faster speeds. But here I think that's the best option that we can do here. And for storage, we have a Seagate Barracuda 2TB. I really wanted to get an SSD in here, and if you want, you could change this out and get something like a 500 gigabyte SSD for around the same price. And if that's enough storage for you, then I would recommend going that option. But if you need a lot of mass storage, games these days are getting really big, then hard drive might be your best option at this price point. And then we have no graphics card in this build, because this I made at the $300 price point. I made for this build, I parted it out so that it's good for future upgradability. So right now, the performance with this Pentium Gold, if you run on it does have integrated graphics, but this build won't be great for gaming right away. But the great thing about this build is it is really easy to upgrade this build for a pretty decent price and get up to a really decent gaming PC, I would say. So there's no video card here right now, but you do have those integrated graphics, although not great in the Pentium processor. And also, I forgot to mention, there's no CPU cooler here because it does include a stock Intel cooler. Not the best, but $300. And then for case, we went with a Cooler Master Masterbox Q300L, just a Micro ATX case. I believe it does have some USB 3.0 ports at the front. Okay, so no USB 3.0 ports in the front, so you could spend a little bit more to get that on a slightly better case. But it does include a front fan, completely mesh front panel here, so plenty of airflow. And I believe it even has, it might include a fan at the front. Don't quote me on that though. But yeah, overall for the price, I think it's a great case. And then here we went with a Thermaltake Smart 500 watts. So It's only 80 plus, but it's 500 watt, which is plenty of headroom for upgradability down the road. And you really don't need this much. I was planning on getting the 430 watt, that would make a little bit more sense here. But the 500 watt, at least at the time of parting these out, was actually a little bit cheaper than the 430 watt. So of course I went with that one. And the total here is a little bit over 300 actually, it's 323. I believe when I parted this out, it was indeed under 300 because right now parts are varying in price all over. So with that being said, if you can find a cheaper option similar to these here, then I think that'd be a great idea to try and do that. And I'm not going to try and go too in depth into each of these parts because with how many lists there are here, I don't want to make this too long of a video, so I'm going to try and keep it as short as I can. Alright, on to the $600 build. So here we have the Core i3 9100F, another Intel processor, because again, right now the more budget Ryzen processors are just out of stock everywhere. So if you can get one at MSRP, I would highly recommend going with a Ryzen 5 1600, the newer 12 nanometer refresh, the AF one. That would be definitely a slightly better processor than we have here, because that would be a 6-core 12-thread processor over this, I believe 4-core 4-thread i3. And then this also does not include a stock cooler, meaning that we had to throw in a Hyper 212 Evo here for 35 bucks. It's a really good cooler. It's a little bit pricey for this budget, but I think that it's a pretty good option. Then again, we went the same motherboard. Again, I think it's a pretty decent motherboard for the price. And now we were able to actually bump it up to 2x8 gigabytes, so a total of 16 gigabytes of G.Skill Ripjaws 5 RAM. And this kit is actually running at 3600 megahertz, which is really good for the price. So you'll be seeing this kit a lot because at $76, I think this is a really good budget option. And then as far as storage goes, we now can actually afford an SSD. So we threw in a Patriot Burst 120 gig SSD. I really wanted to put in an M.2 SSD considering this motherboard can support it, but it just wasn't possible at this price point. And I have worked with a Patriot Burst SSD before, and I can tell you that they are really good performing for the price. So I think that for just $20, I think that's a great value SSD. And then of course we went the same mass storage 2 terabyte Seagate Barracuda drive. And then for video card, we were actually able to put in a graphics card this time. And this i3, by the way, does not have integrated graphics. It's the F model, meaning it does not include that. So it works out okay here though, because we do have a 1650 Super. And I think that a 1650 Super and this budget of a build and this price point of a build, I think that's a really good value card. It's just ever so slightly more expensive than the 1650, but it performs pretty marginally better than the stock regular 1650. So I think for the price, the 1650 Super is definitely a better value. And then we went with the Fractal Design Focus G Mini. And if you wanted to, you could use this case in the last build, and you could use the last case in this build. They're pretty interchangeable. They're both micro ATX cases for around the same price. However, this one I think does include okay, so this one does not include a rear fan, I believe, but it does have that front mesh panel and I believe some fans at the front. So yeah, I believe there's 2 fans or maybe a single fan at the front there. And then we went with the same 500 watt power supply, because for the price, a 500 watt power supply, this one, for just $55, it's still plenty of power for this build. So I think that's still a great value even here in the $600 list. Okay, now moving on to the $1,000 build. This one actually is again slightly over $1,000. Prices are just fluctuating way too much right now to get reliable prices, but I think that sometimes you can get it for under $1,000. Prices are just crazy right now. But we have a Ryzen 5 3600. So this is a 6-core 12-thread processor. It performs slightly better. It's slightly faster than the Ryzen 5 1600 AF, the newer refreshed model. But I think that in this price point, if you can find that 1600 AF at its MSRP price or close to it of $85, then I think that would still be a better value in this price point. but the 3600 is definitely no slouch when it comes to performance, and for the price, I think it's still a really good option. And then for motherboard, we went with an MSI X470 Gaming Plus motherboard. So we're actually on X470 platform here, which is pretty good for this price point, I would say. And this looks like it has this actually has an 8+4 pin CPU connector, so should be pretty good there. And we also have some pretty beefy VRM, so you should be able to do some decent overclocking here. Of course, an M.2 slot, 4 DIMM slots. And I really like that this motherboard actually has that steel-plated PCI Express 16X slot, which means that it won't completely eliminate it, but it should prevent GPU sag in most cases if you're using a heavier GPU, which I think is a really good thing. And then for RAM, we went with the same G.Skills RipDrive 5 16GB kit. Again, for the price, I think it's really a great value kit of RAM. And so for storage, we went with the same Seagate Barracuda drive, 2TB, and then an SN550 1TB M.2 NVMe SSD. And you'll see this one a lot in the rest of the lists because I think this is a pretty underrated SSD. For the price, it offers really good performance. Again, for $125, an M.2 NVMe SSD of 1TB capacity. This is a great drive for the price, I would say. And then for graphics card, we were able to put in an RTX 2060 6GB for $340. I remember at the time of creating this list, this was actually only $300. So try and find a 2060 for around the $300 price point. And then you should get a little bit closer to that $1,000 price point that we're trying to target here. But prices, just like I keep saying, fluctuate way too much to be able to get exact prices of what you will find. But another option is if you wanted to go used, then I would recommend a GTX 1080. You can get one for about $300, and I think that would also be another great option in this price point. And then for case, we went with the NZXT H510 ATX case. So for $70, I feel like it's a really good looking, really good quality case. It does include a USB Type-C port on the front, as well as another USB Type-A port. And I think that for the price, it's just a really solid case. And then we went the Cooler Master 650 watt 80+ gold certified power supply. It's fully modular. So for $100, I think it's really good value, and then you'll have plenty of upgradability, upgrade room for down the future if you want to get more power hungry parts to upgrade. And so yeah, that's the $600 list. Or sorry, that's the $1,000 list. Alright, and up next we have the $1,500 list. So for the CPU, we went with a Ryzen 7 3700X. So for $260, this is a really good CPU. It's able to put out plenty of power for what you need. And so this is a 8-core 16-thread processor. And then for cooler, we went with a Hyper 212 Black to get some extra cooling, and then that way we will have some overclocking headroom. You can do some decent overclocking on this processor. You could, if you wanted to, spend a little bit more money to get an AIO and then do some pretty decent overclocking on this processor. And then for motherboard, we have the MSI MPG X570 Gaming Plus ATX motherboard. So for $170, we're getting on that X570 platform, meaning that later down the line, if you want to upgrade that CPU, we will have plenty of headroom for any upcoming Ryzen processors. And so I think that that's a really good idea at this price point. Maybe you can save a little bit of money and go with something a little bit cheaper like an X470 B550. But this will give you plenty of future proofing if you want to upgrade down the road. And then we went the same 16GB kit because that's just, in my opinion, that's such good value. And then, like I said, you will see this quite a bit here because this, I think, is really good storage setup here. So 2TB HDD, and then 1TB SSD NVMe. So for that price, I think that that's a really good setup to have there. And then for graphics card, we went with an RTX 2070 Super. So for $500, this card will perform absolutely amazingly. You won't have any problems. You can do anything you need, anything you want on this card for at least, I would say, minimum of 3 years. I would probably even more. This card is just so powerful. I think that another option is it's slightly cheaper. It's actually quite a bit cheaper. You'll get a little bit less performance, but the RX 5700 XT from AMD will be a little bit less cheaper, a little bit cheaper, but it also won't perform quite as well. But that's another good option. And then for case, we went with a Cooler Master Case H500. So this case, it has two 200 millimeter fans in the front, and then it includes, I believe that's a 120 mil fan in the rear. And these are RGB fans, by the way. If you care about that, you can get some pretty good bling going with these. But for the price, $120, plenty of airflow. I think that's a really solid case for the price. And then we went with the same power supply, 650 watt, 80 plus gold certified, $100, fully modular power supply from Cooler Master. I think that's a great option. And then this one did end about $60 under budget. So you could put that $60 towards something else, like maybe a slightly more powerful, slightly more storage, or maybe a slightly more, maybe 32 gigs of RAM instead of 16. But I think that's a little bit overkill unless you're doing stuff like video editing and stuff like that pretty often. And then for the $2,000 build, we went with the same Ryzen 7 3700X processor, and then we went with an AIO this time. So NZXT Kraken X63 liquid cooler for $150. I think you can get really good cooling performance here. You can do some decent overclocking, especially since we do have another X570 Plus board here. So the VRM should be plenty good enough to do anything you need as far as overclocking. Pretty decent overclocking. Again, that steel-plated PCI Express slot I think is really valuable to have. So overall, for the price, I think that this is a really good motherboard to go with. And then for RAM, we got a kit of Trident Z RGB RAM, 2x16 gigabytes. So we got 32 gigabytes of RAM this time, DDR4, 3600 megahertz, of course. So for $175, it's a little bit expensive, but again, you're getting that RGB, so it'll, depending on what your preferences are, you could scale this back a little bit and get a non-RGB kit that'll perform the same for a little bit cheaper. But at this price point, I think we can start to get a little bit more blingy and put some things to make it look nice for ourselves. And then for storage, it's really hard to find a solid 4 terabyte hard drive that's 7200 RPM that's not like a network storage drive or enterprise drive. So I think that 2 of these drives should do it for a lot cheaper of a price than trying to get one single 4 terabyte drive. And if you don't need all that storage, you could take off these 2 hard drives and then upgrade this SSD to something like a 2 terabyte Samsung drive or something to get more SSD storage. That will be a little bit faster speeds in your storage, but you won't have quite as much. I think that would be a pretty good option though if you don't need all that storage. And then for graphics card, we went with an RTX 2080 Super. So this card, again, $720. This card will do anything you need it to. Absolutely amazing card. It's a little bit expensive, of course. We're getting to the really high-end stuff here, but this card is definitely amazing card that will be able to perform amazingly for a really long amount of time. And then for the power supply, for the case, we went with the same case as last time, the H500. Again, plenty of airflow, tons of airflow, giant fans in the front, mesh front panel. And then for power supply, we went with the 750 watt gold certified fully modular power supply, $150. I believe this was a little bit cheaper last night when I was parting this out, but still great power supply. I think if you can find something a little bit cheaper, I think that'd be a good idea. And then this one actually did end up a little bit under budget. So we're at $19.95 for this one. But again, that price will vary depending on when you're watching this video and what you can find at that time. And now on to our final build. This is the $3,000 build. This is all out. This will perform better than you will ever need. So starting off, just the absolute best at this time for gaming, the i9 10900K, completely overkill. but at this price point, like that's pretty much what we're going for at this point, is overkill. And then another AIO, of course. You can get the same NZXT Kraken if you would like. For this one, I believe that they include brackets for mounting on both the Intel platform and AMD, so you can use the same AIO for both. And then for motherboard, we went with a Z490, of course. That's the only option as far as right now. That's the only option for the 10 series processor. So LGA 1200, the new socket that they're using. So $250. It's quite expensive, but Z490 is going to be that way. And so this board, pretty much anything you'll ever need. 3 steel-plated PCI Express slots, 4 DIMM slots, plenty of overclocking capability, and it's got, of course, at this price point, you would expect it, a built-in, already installed onto the side I/O shield, so you don't have to install that separately. And then for RAM, we went with Trident Z RGB, 32 gigabytes. Same kit as the last time, $175. Still, I think pretty overkill unless you're doing anything editing quite a bit. But again, this is $3,000 build. We're going overkill here. And then same storage setup as last time, actually. Same thing goes here. If you want to remove these 2 hard drives and get slightly more SSD storage, I think that's another great option if you don't need quite as much mass storage. And then for graphics card, we're going all out here. RTX 2080 Ti. Most powerful card you can get on the market right now. The only way you could get more powerful than this is if you did, to an SLI or something like an RTX Titan that's just absurdly overkill for anything that you need. In fact, the RTX Titan is only marginally, just a small amount better than the RTX 2080 Ti, while being almost double the price, or around double the price. And then for the case, we went with a Be Quiet Dark Base Pro 900. So this case, absolutely amazing case, $270, so really expensive, but great case, and I think it'll be great for this build. And then we went with a Corsair RM 850 watt, 80 plus gold, fully modular power supply, $135, which is actually cheaper than the last few right now. Prices are just super crazy, so I guess I recommend this one for the last few builds, considering it's a little bit cheaper, but it's kind of crazy right now with how crazy prices are. I'll probably link different power supplies in the description. And all the links in the description will be basically the same parts as you see here, but I'll just put in the parts that are the best price at the moment. So I won't, for example, change this from an RTX 2080 Ti to like an RTX 2080 Super, but I might put in a different model instead of the Asus one, depending on what's cheapest at the time. And then this one came in $14 over budget, but again, if you're spending $3,000 on a computer, I would guess that you'd have $14 left over to spend on a computer. So I think that's a great $3,000 build. Of course, completely overkill, but I think it's a great PC. All right, guys. Sorry that was a bit of a longer video. After editing through that, I found it was a little bit over 20 minutes. But let me know down in the comments whether you prefer shorter videos, like around 10 minutes, or longer videos like this, a little bit over 20 or around 20 minutes. And again, I will leave every single link to the parts that I've shown you today in the description, and so you can go check those out. And they are affiliate links, so it'll help me out, but it won't charge you any extra. So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you next time.